Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 2nd of October. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. First we're going to start with Liman bridgehead. As if you remember, as you know, the Russians left Liman bridgehead, and as you can see the Western sources map has been updated. Now we see that all these areas are under Ukrainian control. Furthermore, the Ukrainians got control not just over Liman, but Zarechne, Tarskoye, Tirny, Yampolovka. All this area is under Ukrainian control. Furthermore, today during the day, the Ukrainians were making few attempts of counter-offensive operation in direction of Kremenная. It was some kind of recon combat. They were trying to understand what's going on there and just to press this area and not to give the Russians to relax on this front line. If we are talking about the Russians, of course they're in panic. Today we got a lot of interesting updates in their segment of internet. Most of the Russians are in panic because of the leaving from Liman. They were blaming some officers, high-rank officers, who were responsible for defending this area. Furthermore, today we got some data that some general staff of this defense line were dismissed and new officers were hired on their position. So the situation is very interesting, but now let's talk about the situation in the ground. So the Russians are trying to establish new defense line near Kremenная, and this is a very important and vital question. Of course, there is a difference between defending Kremenная and defending Liman for many reasons, and one of them is that if we're talking about Liman, the Ukrainians attacked Liman from at least three sides: from the west, from the north, and from the south. So that's why it was these two attacks allowed the Ukrainians to encircle this town. But if we're talking about Kremenная, for now the Ukrainians have just at least just one position to attack, and they can attack Kremenная from the west, from this side. And when I'm talking about the west, I'm talking about the area from Seversky Donetsk River to, let's say, this forest. So this is the only area where the town can be attacked. So that's why if the Ukrainians want to repeat their tactic of encirclement anyway, as we discussed as well in my previous videos, the Ukrainians first they need to take control over Privillia. And after that, from Privillia, the Ukrainians at least will be able to establish some fire control or something more against a town by the name of Stara Krasyanyanka, and at least this will give them opportunity or possibilities to encircle this town. So without Privillia, it's highly unlikely to take this town or to use the frontline attack tactics, and of course this might bring and might give a lot of losses from the Ukrainian side. If we're talking about the north direction, there are also not everything is not so perfect as the Ukrainians think that might be, because if we take a look at this bridgehead, you're gonna see the Liman bridgehead. When the Ukrainians were moving, you can see that there are a lot of towns, and the Ukrainians were taking town by town. First they take Oskol, Krimki, Rubtsy, Karovy Yar, if you remember. Then they moved to Ovchor Yar. Then there was a very heavy clashes in Redka Dub. After Redka Dub, the Ukrainians started moving to the south. So every day they took towns, and this is very important because towns is the place where you can hide your infantry, where you can hide your tanks, artillery system, or to have some defense position. But if we're talking about the bridgehead between these two rivers, this one Zhiribyanka river, this Zhiribets river, and this river Krasnaya Rika, these two rivers, and if Ukrainians want to move to the north, as you can see, there are no towns at all in this area. There are just some forest. Let's take a look at the Russian sources map in this area. Now, as you can see, there are not much places where the Ukrainians can establish their position. Anyway, they need let's say if they want to move forward, first they need to cross a lot of territory, and then they need to drop their infantry, and this infantry should prepare some trenches to establish some position. So According to this map, it's highly unlikely that this walk through this area will be very easy job. But anyway, the Ukrainians still have possibilities to move along the river in direction of Nevska. So along the river to the north, and this is also an option. And maybe somewhere at Novosada and Nevska, maybe they will be able to turn to the right and then to attack these towns. So anyway, the Ukrainians, I think that they have some plan, but maybe they are not planning to attack in this area. We'll see, who knows. If we're talking about Liman bridgehead, Liman battle, we can say that, at least not we can say, but the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians attacked this area with artillery, with aircrafts, with any type of weapon they have, and as a result of those attacks during the diplocate operation of their forces in this area, the Ukrainian lost around 200 soldiers killed, around 320 soldiers wounded, around 10 tanks and 25 armored vehicles. So as you can see, the Ukrainians paid big price for this bridgehead. So, and the most important thing, that they couldn't encircle the Russians in the area, and we can say that they couldn't capture the Russians, and they couldn't force the Russians to have some kind of general battle in this area. If you're talking about the Russians also paid a big price. They paid the town, this area, they left the territory. A very important bridgehead in this area. The bridgehead they used to control Slaviansk and to shell Slaviansk. And also, of course, they were wounded and killed, I believe, but nobody knows the numbers about that. The Ukrainians didn't provide this information. If we're talking about the north area, there were some changes on the Kupinsk-Dvorechye bridgehead in this area. First of all, the Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians attacked the Ukrainian forces in a small town by the name of Senkovka, and this town, and in a small town by the name of Petropavlovka, these two towns. So as you can see, according to the Western sources map, town by the name of Senkovka is still the Russian control, but the Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours they were attacking this area, trying to pin down and destroy the Ukrainian forces. And as a result of those attacks, the Ukraine lost around 100 soldiers and 12 armored vehicles. So as you can see that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians, just as a result of some rocket attacks, artillery attacks, aircraft attacks, lost more than 620 soldiers and more than 47 armored vehicles all along the front line from Dvorechye towards Liman. But anyway, the Ukrainians continue moving, and I believe that they need some time to do some regrouping, to bring more infantry, to bring more forces, and after that they will be able to continue their offensive operation in the north of Lugansk region, if they will do this. Of course, if they do this, because something tells me that maybe the Ukrainians are not planning to continue doing anything on this bridgehead, for many reasons, and one of the most important reason is that the Russians, that there is something very interesting started this night at Nikolaev-Kherson bridgehead, something very interesting. So I believe that maybe the Ukrainians will take some pause, will take some time, and maybe later, after according to the result of the counteroffensive or any mass that now is going in the south, they will start or continue their offensive operation in this area. For now, there are no changes. Furthermore, today I think that we need to discuss another important thing from this bridgehead. If we take a look at the map of disposition, this is the map of disposition of our bridgehead, of our area where this is Liman, this is Seversk, this is Kremennaim, the area where the Russians established their fortification. If we're talking about the Russian side, as you can see, they managed to move some reinforcement to this area. Now this territory is under protection of 208th Motorized Regiment of Bars Infantry Battalion. This Bar 13 and Bar 16 were the forces who were located in Liman, and these the main forces who hold Liman as long as we saw. Also, there is 752nd Motorized Brigade and 2nd Motorized Brigade. Maybe there are more forces in this area, some maybe campaigns or something like this, but for now, these the main 4 brigades or 4 types of units who protect this area. If you're talking about the Ukrainians, as you can see, they moved a lot of forces in this bridgehead. And I mentioned one important thing I would like to tell you about this, that the thing is that for those that offensive operation in this area, the Ukrainians moved a lot of forces from Seversk bridgehead, from this area. If you remember, there were Charlie Group we discussed, there were a lot of infantry brigades between Seversk and the Russian forces, and now as you can see, this territory is totally empty. Now we can see that there is 54th Mechanized Brigade near Seversk, to be more precise, in Serebryanka, their main base. There is 414th Defense Brigade. There is 10 Mountain Assault Brigade, and this brigade lost a lot of blood during the previous weeks. If you remember, this brigade were trying to attack Sporna to storm Berestova, and they achieved some success, but then the Russians moved their Wagner groups and moved these forces back. There is 118th. So as you can see, in comparison with the previous weeks, there are less forces of the Ukrainians on this area, and this is very important for many reasons. First of all, what do the Ukrainians are the Ukrainians planning to move back these forces just to be on the safe side on this front line, because now this front line is weak, because the Ukrainians lost a lot of forces during the Liman offensive operation. This is the one thing, and the second, that they moved some force from this flank. And if the Ukrainians are planning to move some forces back just to be on the safe side, that means that maybe we won't see any offensive operation from Liman bridgehead, because you need some manpower to do this, and as you can see, the Ukrainians use their manpower from the front line. And the question to the Russians, are they planning to do something with this situation? Because now we see that there are less forces near Seversk, and it's the best time for the Russians, if they have such possibility, if they have manpower, they have anything, to start some kind of counter-offensive operation in the direction of Seversk. Do they have this manpower, this power to complete this operation? I'm not sure about this, but I believe that soon we're going to see this. But anyway, now let's talk about Bakhmut and Artyomovsk. Yes, we saw about significant success of the Ukrainians in Kharkiv and Donetsk region, but the Russians continue storming Bakhmut very slowly, step by step, and so on. But anyway, today we got the first confirmation, the first update, that some Reko in combat, some commandos or Russian scout entered Opotna, this town on this, let's say, block on the south of Bakhmut. So as you can see, no matter the situation on Liman bridgehead, the Russians continue storming and attacking Bakhmut. And there is also another question, are the Ukrainians planning to do something with Bakhmut, or for now they're not planning to change their focus and allow the Russians to attack this fortification? Meanwhile, they will do their job on LPR or any other region on the north or something like this. So for now, there is no answer to this question. Now let's talk about Kherson district, about Nikolaev Kherson district. Yesterday, the Ukrainians started their counter at night, somewhere in the evening, started their counter-offensive operation in this region, and in 3 directions. The first one, Nikolaev Kherson direction. The second one on Andreev bridgehead in direction of Davydibrody. So they were trying to attack this town, and with small 2 roads in direction of Bruskinskaya from this bridgehead and in direction of Kostromka. And the third direction was from the north in direction of Zolotaya Balka, and the Ukrainians got this town. Just like 15 minutes before I started recording this video, some Russian sources reported about another critical situation on the front line, and they were saying that Ukrainians are moving from Zolotaya Balka in direction of Berislav. So their main goal of the Ukrainians is to attack Berislav using this road, and all along this road they are planning to attack the Russians and push the Russians from this bank of the river. So this is a very important, very interesting situation, and we need to follow this situation as well, because we can understand the Russians' behavior near Liman bridgehead. They're have insufficient forces, lack of infantry, and lack of artillery. So they have lack of manpower, and we understand that they need to make a decision. So they see that there is an offensive operation near Liman, and there is offensive operation near, or planning offensive operation on Kherson district. And they need to make a decision. They can't concentrate or to help forces in this region and at the same time at another region. They can't do this because they don't have power. That's why they started their mobilization process. And as you can see, as I mentioned during the battle for Liman, I mentioned that the Russians haven't moved any reinforcement to this area. They were trying, and they're still trying, to solve the problems on this bridgehead just with the forces that located on this front line. They're not moving anything. They're not moving anything from the territory of Russian Federation. They're not moving anything, and it's very important, from the south. So they took a decision not to move anything there. And this is a very important question, because usually if you do such a decision, that means that you understand and you know that somewhere on other front line something is going to happen. And that happened. And that happened on the Kherson district, because the Ukrainians started attack from 3 directions. If we're talking about Mykolaiv, Kherson direction, that was some kind of requiem combat. Just few regiments were trying to attack the towns in the gray zone. If we're talking about Andreev bridgehead, the Ukrainians were trying to attack David Brody, and with around 6 battalions of forces, including 2 battalions of tank battalions, they were attacking David Brody, and 2 more Ukrainian BTG were sent in direction of Bruskinska and Kostramka. These 2 towns are under Russian control, so that's why the Ukrainians moved some forces to the south with one purpose: to pin down the Russians in this area, not to allow them to move to help their forces in David Brody. But anyway, the Ukrainians were defeated in this operation, and they had a lot of losses during this operation. And the Russians are saying that as a result of this counter-offensive operation in direction of David Brody, Bruskinska and Kostramka in this area, the Ukraine lost around 240 soldiers killed, 31 tank, and 78 specialized armored vehicles. I believe you saw a lot of videos how the Ukrainians were moving along these fields with convoys and columns of their armored vehicles, tanks, and then the Russians start artillery and shelling. So I believe that this is very truthful information. So that at least on this bridgehead, the Ukrainians were defeated, but the Ukrainians managed to achieve some success in Zolotaya Balkan. And today we got a very interesting update from this area as well. And the most important part that I mentioned, that the Russians, they didn't, this is the second area where the Russians decided not to stand till the last Russian, or we can say like the Ukrainian decided to fight till the last Ukrainian. The Russians decided not to do this. Furthermore, today we got report that as soon as the Russian forces in Zolotaya Balka, Shevchenko, in this area mentioned the Ukrainians, they took a decision to retreat from this area immediately, and they fell back from this area towards more reliable position. So as you can see, and this is a very important tactic that the Russians decided to use during this let's say buffer period before mobilized forces are going to come on the territory of Ukraine. The Russians uses Mongol tactic of battle. They are running away from the Ukrainians no matter how much territory they are able to take. You see that Ukrainians have 1 million army. I'm not talking about the army that locate on the front line. I'm talking about all police or the armored forces that also on the border with Belarus and towns and Kiev, everything. And the Russians just have 250,000 armors, approximately, something like this. And we understand that the main goal for the Ukrainians on this stage of war, special operation, to capture the Russian army, to freeze them, to pin down, to encircle them, and to destroy, because they have a very big number, very big force, big army in comparison with the Russians. And if we're talking about the Russians, they understand that it's not the best time to fight like wall on wall, town and town, trenches and trenches with the Ukrainians. The only thing they can do, they need to run away from the Ukrainian army. They need to fall back, and then they need to cover the territory with artillery. Then they need to fall back again and to attack your enemy with artillery. Then again fall back and to attack with artillery. And this is the thing that the Russians did in Liman bridgehead. I believe that soon we are going to receive some numbers about the Ukrainian losses on this bridgehead. So the Russians they don't want, and this is very clever decision, by the way. We understand that the Russians are losing territories, but the most important, they are not losing army. But if we're talking about the Ukrainians, yes, they're obtaining new territory, totally ruin their territories where they're not able to bring gas, electricity, roads, supply, products, and so on. Because it's impossible right now, highly unlikely they are able to do this. From the other side, they're losing their soldiers, and the ratio is not 4-1. The ratio is much higher in this case. I can't tell you the real number, I don't want to speculate on this topic, but anyway, we see this. And furthermore, the Russians are saying that as a result of all battles on this front line during the previous 24 hours, the Ukraine lost around 400 soldiers, 43 tanks, and 89 specialized armored vehicles. So the front line the movement of the front line has started. And now we understand, now at least it's my opinion, totally my opinion, it's up to you to believe or not, to trust or not, but now I understand why the Russians lost or gave the Ukrainians this bridgehead. And as you can see, as I told you, they haven't moved any reinforcement to this area, and they decided to concentrate on the south of Ukraine and not to allow the Ukrainians to take control over Kherson. Because if we compare the values between Liman and Kherson, we understand that Kherson has much bigger value than Liman. First of all, Kherson is the capital of this region. The second one is that Kherson is the town on the Ukrainian side of the Dnieper River, and so that's why the Russians, before they finish the mobilization process, they need to hold bridgehead on this area, because I believe that maybe, and I believe that they will try to develop their bridgehead and they will try to attack the Ukrainians as soon as they finish with mobilization process. Another important update are coming from the town by the name of Dnipro. This town, the Russians reported that during the previous hours they attacked some department of special forces in this town, and the Ukrainians lost around 35 soldiers of special forces or agents or something like this. But this is the situation. Also, another important update are coming from the Russian parliament. As you know, the process of including the territories of Lugansk, People Republic Donetsk, People Republic Zaporozhye, and Kherson started on the 30th of September. When there was a big meeting, and during that meeting the president of Russian Federation and the heads of these republics signed a document, and as a result of that was some kind of contract that described the process of including these territories as a part of Russian Federation. But this is not the only step that should be done according to this process. At least I have counted at least three separate process that should be done during this situation. First one is to sign a contract. Then the Russian judges, like the most highest judges in the Russia, should review this contract, and they should tell that the contracts are fine and everything is okay. There is no legal problems or issues in this contract, so we allow you to complete this procedure. And after that, the Russian parliament should adopt important laws. So today the Russians finished the second stage of this adoption, that the Russian judges, they haven't seen any problems with this contract, and they allow this procedure to complete. Furthermore, they gave some explanations, a very important explanation, and they told these Russian judges that all these territories should be included as a part of Russian Federation in the native borders according to the date when these regions were created. This is a very important thing, because according to this wording, that means, if we're talking, let's say, about the Zaporozhye region, this region was created in 1939, so almost like 100 years ago, right? 8 years ago. And this region was created in 1939, and Zaporozhye, the capital of this region, was the part, and it's this town still part of this region. So according to this wording, that means that Zaporozhye also is considered as a part of this area, and Zaporozhye, from this wording, became a part of Russian Federation. As you can see, there are no Russian forces there at all. The same situation about Donetsk People Republic, Lugansk People Republic, and so on. So that means that Liman was taken by the Ukrainians during the first 24 hours, but from the Russian laws and their adoption, this town is part of Russian Federation, or will become on the 5th of October. Because on the 4th and 5th of October, the Russians are planning to adopt every necessary laws, and after that time, these towns, this territory is going to become a part of Russian Federation. So this is also a reason why the Russians are keeping silence, because everybody expected about a lot of attacks, something new, but they want to complete all legal things, and after that they will start doing the thing that they need to do. At least everybody expect that. Now let's take a look at the Russian sources map on the Kherson bridgehead, Kryvyi Rog bridgehead. As you can see, the Russian source map has been updated immediately. The Ukrainians were defeated in this area, just we discussed, and as you can see, they managed to achieve some success near Zolotaya Balka, Shevchenkovo, and now they're moving in direction of where is this town? In direction of Novokakhovka, in this area. So as you can see, there is some icon, meaning that they're moving. And we can say that the second attempt of counter-offensive operation in south of Ukraine has started. The Ukrainians need to take as much as possible. So we'll see, and let's follow this situation. Thank you for watching. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good weekend. Bye bye.